Hey folks, yeah, I'm sorry if I'm a little tired and all that, if I seem a little out of it, which I shouldn't be, but still, I thought I'd talk about something that obviously, a lot of people are talking about, discussing. The Schleg Daddy at OTR Essential is doing 15 reason videos on why and why not Sting should be the world champion. And I thought about it myself, and well, I've thought about it, and I figured, you know what, I'm going to try to give my own reasons, but not two different videos, just try to kind of look at the pros and the cons from maybe not just my point of view, but mainly from the point of view of fans. Now, one of the pros about Sting being the World Heavyweight Champion of WWE is this is something that nobody, and I mean nobody, honestly thought would ever happen. I mean, here's a guy that, when WCW went out of business, was the last piece of the puzzle of WCW to be added to the overall puzzle of WWE. He was the last outlaw, the last WCW mainstay, the last homegrown WCW star to not sign with the company. I mean, you had Ric Flair, you had the Steiners, you had Lex Luger, you had Vader, you name it. Here is a bunch of people that were homegrown stars, even freaking Goldberg. And Booker T and all that, true, some of them may have gotten the starts elsewhere, but not on a major level where they would be looked at for anything else more than just as homegrown stars. If nobody knew about Vader's time in Mexico and Japan and Europe, he'd be like, homegrown WCW guy. Same with Booker T. If they didn't know about his time in Global Wrestling Federation, GFW, along with Stevie Ray as the Albany Express, or the Albany Express, nobody would know that, and they would look at Booker T as a homegrown guy. Lex Luger, like I said, Goldberg, you name it, all these people that were homegrown, made a name for themselves specifically in WCW, were WCW mainstays, and Sting was the only guy that never signed with WWE after all that, even after the company went out of business. I mean, you had Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, you had all of these guys signing with the company, even Malenko and Guerrero and Benoit. For people that didn't even know that they were in ECW or in Mexico or Japan, to them, they were naturally born, homegrown WCW guys, and yet here they were on the main platform of WWE. And again, nobody knew about the back. Mostly nobody really knew where they came from, unless they really did research back in the day. Nowadays, if someone like, let's say, a Finn Balor comes in, and let's say you're a new fan, and you don't know anything about him, but you want to know, you just go to social media, and you'll be like, oh, he was known as Prince Devitt in New Japan. He formed the Bullet Club. Things like that. And you can even throw Kevin Nash and Scott Hall into the mix. The point is, and even the Giant, Big Show, the point is, out of all of them, and mostly the original WCW mainstays, homegrown guys, like I mentioned, in Steiners, Luger, Arn, Flair, Tully, and all them, Barry Windham, Harley Race, you name it, out of all of them, even Dusty Rhodes, out of all of them, Sting was the only guy. And even Roddy Piper, you might throw into that equation, if you will. Even the Road Warriors, if you didn't know about their time in AWA and all that. Here was this one guy in Sting that never signed. Never. Year after year after year. Year after year after year. For 13 years, he never signed. Where was he? He was in TNA, and every time his contract came up, they somehow persuaded him to stay with the company. And he did. Until finally, he said, honestly, he's got to go and check out this opportunity before it's too late. And here we are. But again, here's somebody that of all the names I mentioned that were WCW mainstays, homegrown stars, whatever you want to call them, WCW, some originals and somewhat originals, here's the one guy that never crossed the border, never crossed the line until last year. And now here he is in the WWE and in his second match going after the world title. Something that even Ric Flair, one of WCW's main homegrown guys, one of the franchise players, one of the faces of the promotion, Ric Flair was a world champion here in WWE twice. Goldberg, yeah, he was homegrown indefinitely. He was definitely homegrown, no doubt about it, in WCW. He became the face and franchise for that company a while. Guess what? World champion, not just there, but in WWE. Steiner Brothers, tag team champions, not just in WCW, but in WWE. And the list could go on. True, some of the WCW guys that came over didn't really get the success that they had in WWE. I mean, it really did. What I'm saying is that, okay, I apologize, I'm a little tired, I worked today, but anyway, some of the WCW guys that came over never really got the same accomplishment, never really reached that same level of success they had in WCW in WWE. Vader, a lot of people thought should have been pushed similar to his time in WCW, never happened. You know, Johnny B. Bad, when he came over and became Mark Merrow, he basically had the same kind of success, maybe a little bit better in WWE than he had in WCW. The point is, some of them accomplished just as much as they did, if not more in WWE as they did in WCW, and some didn't. And yet, here's the one guy that was the WCW World Champion multiple times over, and here's the one guy that out of everybody that crossed that border, crossed into enemy territory, if you will, here's the one guy that is the last WCW player not to be the WWE World Champion. Because let's face it, let's be honest to God, okay? When you win another promotion's championship, especially your main competition's championship, and it doesn't matter whether it's your second, third, or fourth match, that basically says that that company, along just like with your previous company, has faith in you to be that champion. And the only reason, let's say for someone like Sting, they would give him a run with the title, even if it's a brief run, is to say, hey look, this is a thank you for everything you did for this business. This is a thank you for helping WCW pick up its A game, and thus, in a sense, help us pick up our A game. In a sense, that would be the reason, that would be the positive, one of the pros of him being the champion. The fact that it's more of a thank you for what he's contributed to this business, and finally doing what they never thought he would do, and that's come over and help out. Oh, that's one of the positives, and it's also giving back in a sense, no matter how the fans feel, because yes, they do have a right to say certain things about it. It would be giving something to the fans that they never thought would happen. And that's Sting as the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. Now, that's a positive. A negative in the eyes of fans would be like, again, now the negative, and this is something that Jeff was bringing up in his video, the negative would be, once again, the WWE's got to depend on these part-time guys, these legends, to, push a story, push ratings, get people's attention on the product. Things like that. Get people's attention on the product. Get people to pay attention, to talk. Get them talking and all that. To them, this is a negative because why should you be depending on someone like basically an early to mid 50s Sting when you should be depending on someone like a Kevin Owens or someone like a Ryback or someone like a Dean Ambrose or a Roman Reigns or a Bray Wyatt or a Cesaro? Why can't you depend on them? Because WWE, in their eyes, and they do have a correction about this, or they are correct I should say in this, WWE has not taken the time to push these guys properly. Cesaro looks like he's got an opportunity, but a lot of fans are afraid it's going to go up, up, and just as about to break, that's what they're afraid is going to happen again with Cesaro. Same with Owens. Push up, 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 same with Wyatt. You can rebuild the Wyatt family to Wyatt family 2.0. Up, up, up. And it's basically because WWE is still stuck, mostly Vince McMahon in the eyes of fans, that feel that this is a stupid move. That Vince McMahon and several people in WWE are still stuck in that mindset that the star is going to be bigger than life. They got to have gimmicks. They got to have looks. They got to be like superheroes or supervillains. That is the negative that fans see, and the only reason why Sting is being pushed. Which, in today's wrestling world, you'd think the WWE would understand and realize fans don't want this anymore. They want what they see elsewhere in the WWE. But that's one of the negatives. The fact that they're using Sting to possibly take the belt off of Rollins and not somebody like an Owens or a Cesaro. Now, another positive about this though is if you think WWE doesn't know about Sting's run in TNA, again, if you don't think WWE doesn't know about Sting's run in TNA, they do. And if you don't think they don't know how many times TNA, and even when TNA was part of the NWA, put the belt on Sting, the world title on Sting, you're out of your mind. The positive for WWE is they would have the right to say, hey, we have the only guy in wrestling history to be the WCW, the TNA, and the WWE World Champion. Something nobody else has ever done. Nobody's ever done it. We're the only people that have that person under contract. We have Sting under contract, and he's the only guy that's been the WWE, TNA, and WCW champion. That's the only reason they would do it. And that, to them, I'm just checking on my dog. That to them, from a positive standpoint, would be good for business. And a positive standpoint for a fan, it would be great for business as well because of the fact that here's one guy that, yes, TNA depended on him. And TNA was like a second home for Sting, basically like a second more downplayed WCW, if you will, for Sting to be a part of. And here's a guy that was their champion several times over, and he's on the verge of doing something that no TNA guy crossing over has ever done yet. And that's be the WWE World Champion. It's true. Again, it's true. Just trying to get my dog in. Again, it's true. It's the fact that any TNA star they've had, past or present, has never been the world champion. Even if they've been the world champion, has never been the WWE champion. They've never had that shot yet. You know, they've never really had that shot. And here's why. Because most of the time, they'll end up in NXT, and that's about it. They'll end up in NXT, and that's about it. You know, they'll end up in NXT, they'll be brought up to the main roster, and then that's about it. I mean, let's be honest. ROH has pretty much had more success with their guys who have been the world champions, becoming the guys in WWE more so than TNA. And you can't count someone like Christian because he was WWE before he was TNA. And you can't say Mick Foley either because Mick was WWE, WCW before TNA. You get my drift? Get my point? And you can't say Jeff Hardy either. Because Jeff Hardy's down there in TNA. The point is, here's a guy in Sting that is on the that WWE can tout personally within their company and say, hey, we got the only guy that's held the WCW, the TNA, and the WWE belt. He's the only guy, and we got him. And you might say, well, that's not technically true. And you're right. But you see, to WWE, that would be a good thing and a more positive thing, because here's a TNA guy, in a sense, if you think about it, a TNA original, if you will, because he was with that company longer than some people thought he would be, somewhat of a TNA original, sort of a foundation for that company, if you will. Here's a guy in Sting, like I say, a somewhat TNA original, TNA legend, and all of a sudden, he's on the verge of being the WWE World Champion. And like I say, in a sense, he was a TNA, somewhat of a TNA original. Now you might say, well, it's not going to last forever. They'll probably end up giving Samoa Joe a shot. And you're right. They might. If they push Samoa Joe hard enough, yeah, they might do it with Samoa Joe. I mean, if they look at his history and how much of a success he was as the Ring of Honor champion and the TNA World Champion, they might push him. They might do it. You never know. But the thing is, that's then, this is now. And right now, you've got that possibility. I mean, true, when they finally put true, if they decide to, let's say, push Samoa Joe to the main event when he gets to the main roster, make him the world champion, they would have the distinction of saying they have the only guy in Samoa Joe that's been the WWE champion, the TNA champion, and the Ring of Honor champion. They would have that distinction, but again, that is then, this is now. And right now, WWE, in their from within, behind the scenes, this would be a boost for them, a positive for them, because they could honestly come out and say, if they wanted to, that Sting, who's under contract to them, is the only guy that's won the WWE, the TNA, and the WCW title. I mean, think about it. When Big Show won the ECW championship, even though it was WWE's ECW, it was still considered the ECW World Championship. It was still at a time, if you will, when ECW was still considered separate from WWE. Sort of like what NXT is right now. So when they took Big Show and made him the ECW champion, they pushed the fact that he was the only guy to be WWE, WCW, and ECW champion. Now, true, they can't push Sting and say he's the only guy to be the WCW, TNA, World, and WWE champion because TNA is still in business, but you get my point. Internally, within business, in the offices of Stanford, behind the scenes, it's going to be a dream come true for them. It's going to be a field day for them should they go in that direction and give Sting the belt. Now, another negative, though, that goes along with the positive is the fact that, yes, Sting could be the world champion, but the negative is whether or not he'd be a part-time champion that would only appear when necessary and kind of pull a Rock or a Brock Lesnar.